Hello and welcome to Record Sports Hotline Live. My name is Daniel Caw and I'm delighted to be joined by Tom and Jerry, Keith Jackson and Scott McDermott.
Only one cartoon character in this studio today, I'm afraid.
Does he know I'm not in the mood for laughing?
How's it going, guys?
I'm okay.
I've had better days, Daniel. I've had better days.
Should we elaborate to the viewers why?
Listen, it's okay used to chuckling away, but it's a serious matter. No, I should have been in Bilbao today, obviously, to go and cover the Athletic v Rangers game on Thursday, but an unforeseen passport issue has prevented me from flying, Daniel. So I don't think I'll say any more than that, other than the divorce papers have been filed. So
You can't joke about that.
we'll leave it. We'll leave it there.
We can all laugh and all that, and then you start coming out the divorce card.
See, serious stuff. Serious stuff.
Look,
Well, aye.
look, hold on here. But this is serious stuff. Now, I happen to know Debs will be absolutely devastated by this mistake that's happened, and it's about time for forgiveness, Scott. So get over it.
Well, we'll see.
Go over it.
We'll see.
I know that you should be sitting right now in the rooftop pool of the hotel in Bilbao.
Aye.
Nice wee cold cerveza.
Yeah, should be tapas tonight instead of pie and beans in the oven, I think, Daniel.
Tapas with Andy Newport or pint
no,
beans
no,
after
Taps off with Andy Newport.
Aye. Not that I'm bitter or anything. Do you know what I mean?
Well, look, this might cheer you up. I think you'll have all seen the trend of people making action figures of various different people in Scottish football. Well, this was sent to me by an esteemed colleague earlier on today.
By the way, that's a bit harsh, is it not?
I must admit, on a bad day for me, that has cheered me up slightly. I have to admit.
If we could get
Jacko is some kind of mixture of Donald Trump and Hannibal for the A-team.
George Peppard.
Daniel, he might be Murdoch.
Oh my God.
He might be Murdoch.
I said to someone earlier, I look like I'm 3 feet tall, and they went, "I should look at it then." And I went,
Life size.
"Aye, very good." There you go. Will you be rushing out at Christmas to buy one of them?
And modify the van.
I like that.
No, I think that's a bit harsh. And if you can kindly supply me with the name and address and rank of the person that put that together, Daniel, I'll take it up with them after.
Absolutely, aye. Well, I'll help you. Where should we start then? Keith, I understand you were at Lennoxtown today.
By the way, see even that. What about where my belt is in my trousers? Look at that. It's like Simon Cowell. So you've got Simon Cowell, Donald Trump, and George Peppard.
Hannibal.
Wow. No, that's not acceptable.
Aye, that's a liberty, isn't it? Bang out of order. Right, so that's 3 of us all embarrassed then. So
Good start to the show, boys. We'll just wrap it.
shall we just move on to football, shall we? Keith, you were at Lennoxtown today.
Yeah, I had a different sort of day. I had a quite enjoyable day. I think Scott would say this himself. One of the few pleasures that you get in terms of getting sent to places to interview. But I think it's pretty harsh, actually. It's not one of the few pleasures, but one of the great guys that you're delighted to be sat in front of is Alistair Johnson. He's just such a nice guy. We'll talk about anything for as long as you want. Really, he's a natural in these press conference situations. So, yeah, we had a long chat with him. Obviously, Celtic were launching the start of their kind of club internal Player of the Year awards, and he was there to sort of publicise that. And we spoke about a few other things that I'm, not at liberty to go into because of the embargo on it. But yeah, I think we might touch on a little bit of it later, just to give people a wee idea about what was discussed today, over and above, the various candidates for Celtic's Player of the Year on the back of, or going into the tail end of a season which looks like another, complete domestic success story.
How many candidates is there though? That's the problem, because Dies and Maida.
I think no matter that Alistair Johnson is so good at talking, I think even he realised that once he'd kind of uttered Dyson Maida, that might be the end of the conversation.
Exactly. I mean, obviously we've got our own awards as well. The football writers, the forums were sent out last week to kind of cast your vote. There's a couple of weeks to vote. Not that too much will change, obviously, in that time, but I'd be amazed if Maida doesn't win it hands down.
Well, Dyson Maida could win more individual Player of the Year trophies than actual major medals this season, which is incredibly cool. And I think he's probably odds on to do that. Although, I tell you what, I mean, Alistair Johnson, what he did make pretty clear, even though he was, absolutely gushing in his praise of what Maida's achieved this season, he also made a very strong case for Callum McGregor in terms of, what Celtic miss when Callum McGregor's not in that side. And perhaps, and I've made this point previously myself, that he kind of gets taken for granted, just because he's part of the furniture. But Callum McGregor for me is another exceptional season.
Not just that, what Callum McGregor does generally, actually being specific, the goals he scored this season, outside the box.
The momentum he gave Celtic right at the start of the season. And I know that obviously Nicholas Kuhn had a great start to the season as well, but Callum McGregor for me just went foot down, throttle down from the very start of the season, just because he knows the importance of getting off to a good start. Scott, we've spoken about this previously, in fact, before we come in here tonight, that Rangers have become notorious for getting a real sluggish start to the season, dropping points. By the time they're going into the first derby of the season, they're already under immense pressure. Callum McGregor was the guy that, if there was any teething problems at the start of the season for Celtic,
he doesn't let it happen.
He was single-handedly taking control of the situation to make sure that points weren't being dropped. I just think the general standard of his performances, though, as a midfield player, joy to watch. And I mean, he would, if I was sitting down just now, Dyson Maida certainly made all the headlines and the eye-catching contribution in terms of goals scored, and that's always going to be, half the battle in terms of winning a Player of the Year award. But in terms of consistency and quality, I just find it really hard to look past Callum McGregor. I think I could see why Alistair Johnson was putting him up as a potential candidate.
So would you go McGregor over?
I would take a lot. I'd take a lot of things. I think you would probably, and it's for all, unfortunately, for all the sort of newspaper tabloid instincts, this is the guy that scored all the goals, and he's taken the credit and the headlines, and he's the obvious candidate.
It's the story with Maida as well, though, with Kyogo leaving. No, that gap was there. Then there was this kind of narrative built about Celtic bringing a striker in to replace him. And there was probably a feeling about Maida last season, the season before, as much as the work rate and all that was there, if there was anything he lacked, was maybe his finishing. The final action.
Yeah.
People didn't see him as a natural goal scorer. And for Brendan Rodgers, to put him up there ahead of Adam Ida, remember, it was brought in as obviously a natural centre forward. And for Maida to then go and produce what he's produced, and it's the quality of the finishes as well. As I say, that the doubts that were there about his finishing,
which were justified. They were justified because it wasn't a good finish. It wasn't a natural, composed, clinical finisher.
Yeah,
that is again the benefit of working with a manager like Brendan Rodgers.
Correct.
Brendan Rodgers improves players, and Maida is a different player entirely now from the one that Ange Postecoglou signed.
Yeah.
Because you looked at him then, you remember the old argument, you'd say, this guy could just finish if he had a final touch, if he had a bit of composure and those crucial moments, he wouldn't be at Celtic because all his other attributes are so good. But Brendan Rodgers has found a way of getting all those raw bits and pieces together and adding this clinical, composed finisher into the mix. And that's why, everybody's been kind of bending over themselves to give Maida all the plaudits, and deservedly so. But I just thought Alistair Johnson made an interesting point when he picked out the importance of Callum McGregor and said he's obviously making it clear. He said, look, Celtic side are night and day when he's not in the team. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. And it's a point that shouldn't be lost on anybody, even though I do think the clamour will be, and the popular vote will go to Dyson Maida.
In the comments section, our pal Gianni, who I don't know if we're talking to, Keith, because we've still got no pizzas, but
no sponsorship deal.
He does say you could say the same for Maida, but he's always fit, so that's never the scenario. I think he meaning that he's just as crucial as McGregor. Mark Fairfield says Dyson should get 2, 1 for half a season as a winger, 1 for the goal scoring machine he became.
Well, he's been about 2 players every time he's walked out onto a pitch, so maybe he should get 6.
Aye, maybe, aye. Rebel says Maida, the most improved player of the season, deserves recognition this year. Green Machine says Callum makes the team tick, Maida makes the opposition scared. A couple as well here. Stephen Heaney says, who else has scored 30 plus in the top league for the country other than Maida? I'll wait. Frank Carson says no other player comes close to Maida for player of the year.
That's a cracker.
There's a little bit of a debate though, guys, in the comment section about overall player of the year. There's a few Rangers fans chiming in. Robert Steele saying Raskin's a more obvious choice for overall player of the year, or Czerny for his display at Celtic Park.
For one game. For his display at Celtic Park. Look, I can understand why Rangers fans won't want to listen to this, because it's not great to hear, but the bottom line is the team's been destroyed once again in their own backyard over the course of a campaign. You can't make a case, a strong, coherent case for anybody in a Rangers shirt this season, because it's been another shambolic season.
Raskin he was the one, Keith, that kept coming up. I mean, there's another one.
Raskin's been excellent.
Aye.
But, he's not part of a successful side. And that is something that you have to factor in. Yes, it's and he has been, and I've praised Raskin heavily throughout the course of the season, and I've said that I thought he was a really talented player. When he first came in, I couldn't understand why he fell out the picture for a while. Raskin's a top class operator, no doubt about it, but Celtic are running off with all the prizes.
He's still been inconsistent, Raskin. I mean, he's
been as consistent as anybody in a Rangers shirt.
That's what I was going to say. In the Rangers squad, he probably has been the most consistent over the course of the campaign. But even then, this team is so inconsistent that he's almost kind of been dragged into that. And that's the thing about Callum McGregor. I mean, Callum McGregor's probably 2 or 3 games this season where he's been a bit off it like everybody. But in the main, you think of him and Maida, they've produced almost every game.
Well, what they're doing is achieving a level of consistency and excellence.
Yeah.
And Rangers have fallen so far short of that. Yeah. Right. And that's why ultimately the argument about, the only thing that will be interesting is there's so many different candidates at Celtic. Obviously, Maida's an obvious one. Callum McGregor's an obvious one, but Schmeichel might come into it. Yeah. Carter Vickers could come into it.
Kuhn a few weeks ago might have come in.
Kuhn
was the player of the first half of the season, arguably so. But
see the thing about the Rangers players, Rangers fans no doubt will come back at that and they'll say, well, Raskin schooled McGregor in the Old Firm game at Ibrox, or where was Maida for the game at Celtic Park or whatever. But that just sums the Rangers' whole season
they're
up.
Capable of hitting heights, but they can't do it consistently.
Callum McGregor and Dyson Maida do it every week against all the lesser teams, score every week, 8 out of 10 every week. Callum McGregor scoring goals from outside the box, he's creating goals as a number 6. He's not just a guy that sits there kind of dictating the team's tempo or whatever. So that's the whole point. Of course, in one-off games, Raskin's looked brilliant in a couple of the Old Firm games. But it's about doing it over the course of a season. And no Rangers players been capable of that. That's why they're sitting whatever they are behind the league.
Just to go back to that, did you say, Keith, you would go for McGregor overall if you had the vote?
No, I'll probably go with Maida, but I do take the point. I think there's a really strong argument to be made for Callum McGregor, and I really enjoy watching him play. I like midfield players because I feel that more often than not, that's where the games are won and lost. And his influence in the midfield for Celtic, it's just, as Scott says, it's just a steady 8 out of 10 every week. And that's, I think as well, if you speak to anybody in at Celtic, they'll tell you about the influence that he has away from the pitch, the calming influence, the sort of experience, everything that he brings. He brings so much more. Dyson Maida looks to me, and people that have had experience of dealing with him will tell you he's kind of quiet. He just keeps himself to himself. He takes care of his own business. Not that interested in speaking to too many people, even if it's his own teammates. But Callum McGregor goes in there and he takes on the burden of, he will represent the whole dressing room, the whole football club. And he takes that sort of responsibility onto the pitch with him every time he pulls on a shirt. And you see it, and you see the way that he makes the team work around about him. And if your teammate's not having a great game, Dyson Maida's not the guy that's going to go over there and give him a pat and say, come on. But McGregor is. And I just think his sort of contribution shouldn't be undervalued, because I think it's huge.
And Rangers, if you want to look at the bigger picture, if you think of Callum McGregor and Scott Brown before him, Rangers have lacked that person, that player for, ironically, probably since Barry Ferguson.
No.
Callum McGregor does the same job now at Celtic as what Barry Ferguson did at Rangers, and I don't think Rangers have really had anybody since then that's done that. And I think that's been a massive part of Celtic's success in the last decade, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. Having Scott Brown there for that length of time, and then Callum McGregor seamlessly taking over that role, not just on the pitch but off it, as Keith has touched on there. I think that's been vital to their success. I think it's been a massive void for Rangers, not having that type of character, that type of player.
Before we move on from Player of the Year, we've got a couple of people chiming in about players out with the Old Firm. Is there anyone for you guys that, Sam Dalby?
Sam Dalby needs to get a mention. Of course he does.
Of course he does.
Simon Murray?
Was that you?
That was me, believe it or not. The Bean Machine. 21 goals this season, Simon Murray.
Simon Murray's had a brilliant season. I'm being facetious. He's been great. But we're not going to have a serious conversation about,
Listen, a couple of the Hibs boys will come into contention. Triantis in the middle of the park has been a revelation for them. To think that they're third place, looking favourites to finish there. I know Martin Boyle didn't have a great start to the season, but he's finishing it like a train. So there's a few in that team. Nicky Cadden has been brilliant for most of the season.
My favourite's Jack Iredale.
Iredale's been very good as well.
Honestly, every time I've watched it, he's stood out like a sore thumb for me.
Darren saying Big Rocky, I think Bashiri means. And without being unkind, he was a bomb scare last season. And now every time I see him play.
But what did we say that we talked about it the other day, where you have to give Hibs credit, Rocky Bashiri credit, David Gray credit, is that David Gray identified this guy is a bit of a bomb scare if you're playing him in a 4.
Correct.
When he's put him into a 3, he's flourished. And he's looked more and more dependable, more and more confident.
As the middleman in a 3.
Yeah. And that was a bit of a managerial masterstroke. The changing of the formation, you know what the key to good management is in a situation like that is to look at your squad, identify what you've got in that dressing room, what you don't have, just as importantly, and find out a formation and system that gets the ultimate out of what you do have in there. And David Gray has been clever enough to work it out. There is no doubt the difference in Rocky Bashiri since Hibs switched to the 3 and Iredale come into the starting lineup, massive.
It just shows you though how you should never write anyone off and how things can turn around in football. If you think of the Rocky Bashiri story, and Hibs were ridiculed, remember, for announcing that they were letting him go, no realising that there was a year clause that had been triggered. So they were forced into keeping him for another season, and people were laughing at this because he'd been so poor for them. Now they're in a situation where they're begging him to sign to sign a new contract, and other clubs are interested. It's been incredible.
Good for him. I'm pleased for him. Keith, last night our discussion on the Guard of Honour got a little bit of a reaction on Record Sports social media channels. Kev chimes in saying, a Guard of Honour, I can see the staunch Rangers management team lining up for that. No bother. And we also came across this one from James Tavernier. It's all the way back in 2016, but he's praising Alloa for their Guard of Honour that they gave to Rangers back then. So we can at least take from that
sportsmanship, unlike some.
Can take from that he will be lining up.
Is that legit? Is that the real deal?
That's the real deal. So we can take from that he will be giving Celtic one on May the 4th if it comes to it.
I don't think he will. I don't think he will. I don't like Guards of Honour. Honestly, I see in general, football is about rivalry and about competition and all the rest. I just don't see the point on it, honestly. I've said that all along.
I'm not big on it. Listen, do you know what? Is it that big of a deal? Would Rangers actually look, if Celtic go to Tannadice get the win or the draw that they need to win the title. Their next game is at Ibrox. This has become a tradition. I don't know where it's become a tradition from. And maybe in many ways, Rangers might, take some sort of moral high ground if they did stand either side of the tunnel and applaud Celtic out of one of their own pitch as champions. But even as I'm saying the words, and this was
Talk
something
meltdown.
This is something that again embargoed for later on, but it was a discussion point that was raised with Alistair Johnson, and I'm sure our readers online and tomorrow's paper will be interested to see the response. I think it's something that is going to be debated because that's the part of the world that we live in. I'm sure that Alistair Johnson never grew up thinking he would be dragged into having a discussion about such an issue, because it just wouldn't be an issue anywhere else. It's an issue here, and I think it's a fair point that Barry Ferguson probably went to Celtic Park for that last Old Firm match determined to tell his players to show Celtic less respect than they have been doing.
Correct.
Over all the while. I think he probably had it in his mind that if anything, Celtic have been shown too much respect by Rangers over the course of the last few years, and in this fixture in particular. And I'm sure he was trying to get into the mindset a little bit. So the idea that he would then turn out and say, right, well, you better applaud the champions and throw some petals at their boots as they come out of the tunnel.
How can we boast about having this brilliant, the best derby in the world?
If we have love and cuddles.
The most intense rivalry in the world. And this is how
imagine Roy Keane's face.
This is how we sell the Old Firm game to the world. Then people are going to tune in. We're clapping each other on the pitch. Come on.
What a comment.
You never know if Rangers were to get through against Athletic Bilbao on Thursday night, maybe the Celtic players would turn around, give them a little clap, and they could all throw beach balls at each other, and everybody could have a jolly old time.
Have a cuddle.
Cuddles in the tunnel.
I doubt it's going to happen.
Cuddles in the tunnel.
Gianni's praising you, Scott. He says, great to see someone talking sense. Spot on. Read the Guard of Honour should get the big man on every night. And he points out Boca wouldn't give River Plate a Guard of Honour either. And there's a lot of Celtic fans saying as well, Parkhead boys saying, I really don't want a Guard of Honour at Celtic Rangers, which I think is fair. I mean, you don't want it becoming really sanitised.
I don't think anybody's expecting it, but you know that we live in a place where points will get scored. The very fact that you've trolled through James Tavernier's previous social media history to find that, it's a certainty that some people, because this is what we do in this part of the world, we find a reason to be offended. And there will be plenty of people that won't be offended in the slightest, by the way, and wouldn't expect anything else. But they'll say that they're offended. They'll say that they're horrified by the whole thing. I'm sure that will happen. You know it. You've lived here long enough. I've lived here long enough. You know that that's the environment in which we live. But, you know, I think there are also big kind of core of Celtic fans that will feel exactly that. Don't want them applauding us. Nothing to do with it.
How did, sorry, I don't want to labour on it too much, but how does it come about? Like, does a team offer it, or does like the officials come in and go, like, how does it work?
Well, this is the thing, and I can't trace it back or track it back to when this actually became a thing in Scottish football.
I'm assuming the home team would need to tell the officials, or the team given the Guard of Honour would need to tell the officials, look, we'll walk out first because we want to do it. I mean, I
was reading today when Arsenal gave Man U one a few years ago, when Van Persie came back, it was Arsene Wenger said, I went out my way to say we'll give you a Guard of Honour. So I assume it must be, it must be the home team has to offer it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about it for the next, and we will. Do you know the thing is, Daniel, we probably will talk about it for another fortnight. But the bottom line is, it's not going to make any difference. Look, yeah, I think in many ways it might be a decent gesture and maybe make Rangers feel as if they have acted the big man in doing something like that. But it's just never going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Not in this city, never.
Especially not with Barry Ferguson as manager.
Especially not with Barry Ferguson as a manager.
Quite right as well.
And by the way, the first Rangers manager that says, I think this might be a good idea, guys.
Aye.
Won't be long for this parish.
That'll be last
Right, what else? Was there anything else, actually, Keith, from Alistair Johnson that we should maybe touch upon?
Not that I can touch upon it. Many times I have to tell you there's an
course.
embargo, but people will see it in the paper tomorrow, in print, and I think the embargo's back at 10 tonight. And it's interesting. There's certainly, look, as I said, there are certain guys that are a pleasure to interview.
He's the best talker in Scottish football.
Terrific.
He's the best
terrific
interviewee. I mean, there's a few right enough, but he is just that typical kind of American.
He gets my vote for Player of the Year for that.
He's the type of guy, you see these interviews in the MLS and stuff where the reporters get into the locker room and all that, and he's the guy that'll be sitting there giving you chapter and verse. Do you know what I mean? He's absolutely brilliant.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I know we will talk about this a lot over the next 2 days, but we've got a Scottish team potentially on the verge of a European semi-final. I know Bilbao's a sore topic, Scott, but I thought we should maybe have a quick glance ahead to Thursday's game. I don't even know what to ask really. How are you feeling about the game coming up, guys?
I think Rangers can get a result, Daniel. I'm going to stick my neck out even this early. I don't know, I've just got a feeling Rangers in this competition, again, many times we've spoken about it. You think of how the first leg went. I felt getting into the first leg, if Rangers could get a draw, I thought, I actually mentioned before the game to some pals and that it kind of, you think of Fiorentina game back in 2008, I know it was a semi-final, but Rangers were really up against it, managed to get a 0-0, went to Italy, almost kind of bored Fiorentina into submission at Ibrox, created very few chances, then went to Italy, and obviously we all know they went and won in penalties and got to Manchester. The Bilbao game felt a bit like that, and for them to get out of there with a draw with 10 men, then 9 men towards the end, I didn't see anything for Bilbao that really scared me as such. I don't underestimate.
They struggled to cut Rangers open defensively. They couldn't play through them.
No. Fenerbahce actually looked better at that in the previous round. There's talk about Inaki Williams maybe being injured, which would obviously be a boost for Rangers. And listen, it's a cauldron over there. They'll be determined to get to the final, obviously, because it's in their own stadium. I'm not underplaying the task that Rangers have got here, but I think...
What did you make, Scott? What did you make of Jose Mourinho went out of his way? And I know he's sour grapes and it's ripping out of him after, losing and getting put out the competition. But he went out of his way to suggest, and it, by the way, it wasn't even subtle. He was basically saying, UEFA want to rig this to make sure Bilbao get to the final.
I know.
And he said that.
He
said that because the Italian opposition they had in the second leg had a defender sent off after 10 minutes.
I think it was Roma. Mats Hummels.
Mats Hummels.
Yeah.
And it was a bit controversial. Sorry.
Yeah, and then Robin Tropper gets sent off after 10 minutes in the first leg at Ibrox.
Then they got a penalty for virtually nothing.
For an astonishing penalty kick, where they've actually tried their best to come up with that. And there was no argument. There can be no argument made that was, and they did use the phrase deliberate handball. Yeah. It just wasn't. Anybody that knows anything about anything knows that wasn't the case. Do you think there's jiggery pokery? Do you think it's possible?
How can it be? I mean, we're away. No, in all seriousness, we're away if we think that could genuinely happen. No, that UEFA.
Why do you think Jose Mourinho said what he said then?
Because he probably does think there's something in it. No, the way he thinks. And as you say, just there'll be a bit of bitterness there about going out. He's been involved in things in the past with refs. I remember Anthony Taylor in the Conference League final or the Europa League final.
Aye, but he was waiting for him in the car.
Aye. So it's maybe not as surprising.
We need to get Josie up here, don't we? We need to get Josie in Scotland.
100%.
Don't we?
I tried my best, Daniel.
You did.
Fenerbahce game to try and get him to Glasgow. So listen, Rangers are up against it going there, but I think if they can produce the kind of performance they did in Turkey, then they've got every chance of getting through.
I think, Scott, I think I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think what you're suggesting is see if you can get a man sent off after 10 minutes, and it was 10 minutes because that's when the foul was made. I know it was 12 minutes when Proper ended up going off the pitch, but there was still those 2 minutes were added on at the end anyway. So 80 minutes with 10 men, then that penalty kick, disgraceful decision, and then Sterling having to hobble off and Rangers are down to 9. I think what you're suggesting is to come through all of that unscathed in the first leg. It feels as if something might be brewing here for Rangers in this competition. 100%. And I agree with you. And I'd also go as far as to say and I've said it frequently, this Rangers squad, for whatever reason, appears to be almost designed to play fast-hitting, counter-attack European football away from home. Yep. That's almost where it's at its most comfortable.
The best thing for Rangers, I think, is that Bilbao they will believe that they're going through. I think they will.
They think they've done enough from the first leg.
I think they will believe 0-0 is fine. We'll get Rangers didn't create too many chances, albeit down to 10 men. Once we get them back to our place, they'll be fine. Rangers need to hope that's their mindset, because that's dangerous. And I think obviously a lot was made about Barry Ferguson's team selection at the weekend, making the 9 changes. They obviously get the last minute equaliser. And I think that will ultimately now will have helped them, because guys like Raskin and Czerny, for instance, 2 of the big players that we've been talking about, 2 of their best players this season, will go to Bilbao, hopefully for them, feeling fresh. And listen, Proper is suspended. Sterling been out as a blow. Sort of get a kind of defensive conundrum, but I can see him going pretty much exactly the way he did in Fenerbahce, and going with the 5 at the back. Tavernier,
the 3 centre-halves.
Tavernier, Suter, Balogun. I think he'll need to play Yilmaz at right back and Jeffrey at left back. He's 3 in midfield, probably Diomande, Raskin and Barron, with Czerny off, Dessers up front.
There's a couple of people in the comments, sorry to jump in, but saying who's in goals, I mean, I would just assume it's going to be Liam Kelly, isn't it?
The shot's his.
It is. Has to be.
So, yeah, I don't think there's even an argument. I think, do you know what I genuinely believe? Having made the decision to take Jack Butland out of the firing line for the first leg, I think it would have been almost condescending of Barry Ferguson to put Butland in for Aberdeen and say, because you're part of my second string.
Of course.
I don't think you could do that to Jack Butland. I don't think he would have deserved that.
You want Kelly to get a wee bit of momentum.
And Kelly, you want to get as many minutes in his glove bag as he can. But I do think that. I think, can you imagine how patronising that would be if you made that decision to take Jack Butland out, which was a huge decision, and then said, well, by the way, it's okay because I'm sending my second team out, so you can get 90 minutes up there and we'll put Liam Kelly back in on the Thursday night. So for that reason alone, it's strange because the rest of the team was changed, but the fact that Liam Kelly stayed in, to me, was Barry Ferguson's way of saying, and that's the way it shall remain until such times as, if Liam Kelly has a sort of a Butland-esque incident, even then he'd probably need to have a couple. I think that Liam Kelly, is in the box seat now. That doesn't mean that Butland's not going to get another game at some point this season, because pretty soon they're going to be playing league games that don't matter anything. So they can maybe share it about a little bit. But for now, for this particular period of the season, where there is something on it, there's something at stake, there's something for Rangers to reach out there and try and grab. I fully expect that Liam Kelly stays where he is for the time being.
Plus, Kelly's not played a lot recently, so that 90 minutes at Aberdeen would have helped him, you'd have thought. Going back to
you just couldn't do that to Jack Butland. That'd have been really disrespectful. If you took him out, had the conversation, made it clear that you weren't happy with him, and then you threw him back in there at Aberdeen. I think that would have been, one was a slap in the face, and Barry Ferguson has said time and time again he's not afraid to make big decisions, and clearly he's not. But I think that would have been a boot in the homage to go with a slap in the face, and I don't think Jack Butland was deserving of that.
Just to go back to the conspiracy theory, right? I love a conspiracy theory, but a few people saying this, it was definitely a red card last week. The penalty was one thing, but are we agreed that Proper deserved to get sent off?
I said that I agreed when VAR gets involved and when VAR point out to the referee that there's probably going to be a shot on goal, there's probably a clear goal scoring opportunity. At that point, I'm saying once VAR has got in the ear of the referee and made that point to him, it can only end one way. But I felt at full speed, at real time, I thought a booking was, more than adequate.
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, having watched that a million times now, you probably need to say it as a red card, denying a goal scoring.
You're certainly not going to you're not going to say to VAR, no, you're wrong, because if you're looking at that, you would go, do you know what, there is a fair chance.
But it's just that you see so few of those incidents, don't you? But it's just a tackle on the edge of the box. You never think that's going to be a red card unless it's a lunge, a two-footed. It was just a kind of bog standard tackle.
Aye, but see, having said that, see the ball that Proper gives Balogun in the hospital pass to put him in that, he's probably worth a booking for that as well. So all in all, it probably was adding up to a red card offence. And by the way, I have to tell you, Rangers were probably better off without him. He's a liability.
Yeah.
And so as difficult as that made the night, and it meant they had to make changes, and they were a player light for such a long period of time. The longer Proper had stayed on that pitch, the more damage he might have done.
Yeah, and let's be honest, he wouldn't have started in Bilbao. I mean, if everybody was fit,
no,
you wouldn't have thought, Sterling's fit.
No, he was only because Suter was suspended.
Aye, exactly.
Before we finish, guys, it's a big night in the Champions League. Aston Villa PSG, 3-1 to PSG going to Villa Park, and Borussia Dortmund, they're 4-0 down to Barcelona. How do you see those ties going?
Villa game's going to be fascinating, isn't it?
I might stick a couple of quid in Barcelona finishing the job.
Aye. No, Villa, that'll be a brilliant game. I mean, PSG have been tremendous. So, I mean,
they're the best team in the tournament.
Aye. It's a tough ask. I mean, Villa Park has been brilliant for them, the European nights, this season, for most of this season. And it'll be a brilliant atmosphere, obviously. And obviously with John McGinn down there, you want to see them. You want to see them doing well. It'll be a great story. Emery's done magnificently well with them this season. But PSG have been different class.
Different class. And the thing that I use my measuring stick analysis on that one is Liverpool. I watched the two legs.
Aye.
And do you know what? As pleased as I was for Liverpool to get out of Paris with, a result in the first leg, I'm wondering, how did that just happen? Because this is the best version of PSG that I've seen since all the money's gone into that club.
Superstars.
And all the superstars.
Yeah.
This is the best version, the most exciting version, most easy in the eye, good to watch. The football is exceptional. It's an exceptional level. Now, having said that, I haven't seen as much as I would like to, or as I would usually do with Barcelona this season, but they're obviously in a right good frame of mind as well, and they've got some exceptional talent with Lamine Yamal's and all these guys. But from what I've seen with my own eyes this season, PSG are going to take all the stopping in this competition, and I think it'll be too much. So PSG win the first leg 3-1 at home, and they were beaten at home by Liverpool. When they went to Anfield, they were actually arguably even more impressive in the away leg than they were in the home leg. And I think it might just be a right tough ask tonight for Villa, especially if PSG were to get an early goal. I think that would just kill the thing.
The strength and depth PSG have got. I mean, the first leg, I love the boy Barcola, and he couldn't even get a game. I mean, he was in the bench. It was the young boy Dewey that started and scored. So, the strength and depth is incredible. And as Jacko said, it's all young, exciting.
It's the speed to move the ball
players.
about. See, I always found PSG a bit laborious. Even they had some great players. They kind of knew they were great players, and there was a little bit of peacock about the way they were strutting about the pitch. See, this team, the attitude is spot on. The pace at which they set about teams is breathtaking. Really a right good watch. And by the way, funny you should say that. I did watch. I don't know if you watched last night. No, you were having your issues last night. Well, I managed to watch Napoli versus Empoli.
I caught that as well.
Napoli are such a good team to watch as well now. It's very kind of similar. No, it's not a carbon copy or by any means, But in terms of being front foot and getting about, and the way that they drift in and out, exchange positions, it's I thoroughly enjoyed watching them last night as well. But for me, as I said, I think we said it last week, for me, PSG are the ones that are going to take all the stopping in this competition.
It could be PSG Barca final, couldn't it? If
It could.
PSG win, they'll probably play Arsenal if they beat Madrid. And obviously, so it could be PSG Barca final. What a final that would be.
No, I think if these two teams play each other, it's these two ties tonight play each other, I'm sure.
It will be, because that's why they're playing on the same nights.
Aye, and then so it's Arsenal or Real will play Inter, or who've Inter got again? They're 2-1 up Inter.
Right, sorry, I don't know where I got that. I was convinced Arsenal were playing
Bayern
PSG
Munich.
in the semis.
Bayern Munich, there you go. Aye. So I
And Bayern Munich, going by Jose Mourinho's theory, finals in Munich.
Finals in Munich,
So
aye.
we can expect
They'll be there.
expect 3 red cards in that.
Hooker, big crook, they'll be there.
Well, we'll be back tomorrow to pour over whatever the scores are in tonight's Champions League games. Thanks so much to everyone for sending in your comments. We really appreciate it as always. And we'll be back to do it all again at 6 p.m. tomorrow night. I think Keith will hopefully be in touch with Andy Newport and Scott McDermott and Bilbao. Oh, sorry, Scott.
I was just about to say,
Thanks,
you've
Danny.
just done
Thanks.
that. What a low blow
Right.
that is.
Do you want me to be honest?
I get the heart.
Keith texted me, Scott, saying do that. So
I did not. I wouldn't do that, my wee pal.
if you want to have it out, that's fine.
Can you imagine, Scott, you're going to come on one night?
Possibly.
Just if for no other reason than I want you to see
If I've stopped
Andy
if I've
Newport.
stopped greeting by that point,
I want you to see Andy Newport by the pool, sangria in hand.
he's budgie smugglers.
Nobody should have to see that.
Well, on that note, and that lovely image, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much, guys. It's a pleasure as always. And I hope you can join us tomorrow. Cheers.
See you tomorrow.